Let's finish this chapter by focusing on the distinction between definite and indefinite reference, which is the last part of our tree here. So remember, a reference can be either generic or non-generic. If it is non-generic, it can be specific or non-specific, where there is a final sub-possibility, which is inside the specific category, you can have a definite or indefinite reference. Okay, so it concerns only specific noun phrases. Right. So you remember that slide? I introduced it to you at the beginning of this chapter, and now you see what reference in progress means and reference completed means. Okay? With the indefinite article, the reference aims at referring to a specific item, although that item is not fully identified. For example, if I say, I heard a bird singing, the reference is in progress, in the process of being built. Okay? If I say, the bird was in fact a robin, this time we all know what kind of bird it is. I just mentioned it. It's the bird I heard singing, the one I mentioned before. So the reference is completed. Okay? You would say abouti in French. We can identify the referent, which does not mean we can give its name, we just know what or who we're talking about. So let's look at some examples and quickly analyze the noun phrase the drapes in the following cartoon. So is it generic or non-generic? Okay, it is non-generic. Is it specific or non-specific? It is actually specific. And is it definite or indefinite? Well, it's definite. You have the article the. But why? Well, because the reference is built. The drapes are identified. Nobody's going to ask what bloody drapes. You can see them on the picture. Now, let's see this one, the inventor of the tape recorder. It is non-generic, it's also specific and definite. The reference is made clear thanks to the prepositional phrase of the tape recorder. There can only be one inventor, and even if we don't have his or her name, we understand who we're talking about. Now, let's look at just the tape recorder. Beware, the tape recorder is a generic reference here, okay? We are not talking about a tape recorder in particular, we're talking about the inventor of all sorts of tape recorders, so not an actual one. We're talking about one that represents the entire set, okay? So remember, when it's generic, don't bother ask yourself whether it's definite or indefinite, all right? The article is definite here, but the reference is just generic. So now we need to understand how a noun phrase happens to be definite. What tools are used to identify the referent? How come we know who or what the referent is? What, who we're talking about? So why do we know which drapes we're talking about? Well, because the drapes are present in the situation of utterance. Situation of utterance, situation d'énonciation in French. Now, what about the salt in this example? Why is it definite? Well, again, because the salt is here on the table, in the situation of utterance again. Now, let's take a look at this sentence. The tea we had the other day was just awful. Why the? Well, here it's the relative that we had the other day that tells you which tea we're talking about. And in this example, I can destroy the moon. Why the in front of the moon? Well, no one's going to ask you which moon. It is not present in the situation of reference. But, well, there's only one moon, so everybody knows what you're talking about. This is what we call shared knowledge, okay? You know what you're talking about because there's only one of them or because everyone shared knowledge, basically. So, why the post office then in this sentence? Why might argue, how can you know where I live and what I'm talking about? Well, we all know culturally what we're talking about, okay? Just like the moon is the only satellite of the Earth, the post office, when you say the post office needs to deliver my mail, well, you're referring to the closest one, the one in charge of delivering your mail, okay? So again, the reference is pretty clear. There's one last case, though, just like in this sentence. So Sally met a man online the other day. I don't know how to tell her that the guy looks a little weird. So why the in front of the word guy? Actually, if you take a closer look, we mentioned him in the previous sentence, okay? She met a man online the other day. The indefinite article a started to build the reference, remember? So this is a case called previous mentioned, une seconde mention in French. Okay. So let's recap the reasons why you get the with a specific definite reference, or say differently, how does the reference get completed? If you consider the examples we've just studied, you will notice two possibilities. Textual hints, that is to say, indications that are present in the text, or extra textual hints, indications present outside the text, like in the situation of utterance, for instance. Textual hints, you can get previous mention. So, like in this example, Sally met a man online the other day. The guy looks a little weird. All right. And in the case of, have you heard of the man Sally met? What we call pre or post modification. Post modification here, you know that Sally met is a relative clause, so it helps identify the referent. We know who we are talking about. So mind you, textual hints must be present in a text. Okay, this is very important, as you will see later. You can also have extra textual hints, like with close the drapes or can you pass the salt. Here linked to a situation of utterance. Well, where's the post office or I cannot destroy the moon are going to be called shared knowledge. So let's comment on a few sentences before concluding. The first friend that Harry made at Hogwarts was Ron Weasley. Why the in front of friend? Well, you're in a case of past modification here with the relative clause that Harry met at Hogwarts. Go to the headmaster immediately. Here you are in a double situation. Both the situation of utterance and shared knowledge. No one needs to name the headmaster because there's only one of them and is clearly identifiable. And the situation of utterance makes it clear who you're talking about. The sun is shining bright. Maybe I should put some sun cream on. Same thing here. Two possibilities. The situation of utterance, your skin is burning, you see the sun shining bright, so that can only be definite. And also shared knowledge, the sun, there's only one sun in our galaxy. I told him not to stay in the sun. He got sunburned and now he is in pain. You can't see the solution here, so you might want to take a minute to try and see what can be the solution. Here, mind you, it can't be the situation of utterance. Look at the illustration. Ted is clearly indoors and the sun is not visible, so it can only be shared knowledge here. The sun. There's only one sun. Angelina was right to divorce Brad. The guy is a psychopath. All right. Here, in a case of previous mention, Brad is mentioned in the line before, so we know which guy we're talking about. The only woman Brad really loved was Jennifer Aniston. We're in a case of pre or post modification. We have the pre-modification only and the relative clause as a post modifier Brad really loved. Can you park the car while I start queuing for the tickets? Here again, situation of utterance and shared knowledge. Shared knowledge, well, you're probably driving the car in the car driving it, so you know which car you're talking about, and situation of utterance as well.